Welcome back to Beholder to No One, a D&D podcast. Greg and I are here today with Elle.
Hi.
Elle is from the Birdhouse Mysteries. You're also in a couple of other games. Like, you're the DM of the Birdhouse Mysteries.
Correct.
What other games are you in?
Starting tomorrow, Wednesday, August 12th, I will be a player in a Curse of Strahd Savage World stream on twitch.tv/CFTRPG. And then later in September, I'll be on another stream, but we haven't announced that yet, so I don't know if I should say any more than that, but it's going to be real cool.
Elle, I met on Twitter, and we are in the pod squad together.
Mm-hmm. And we're practically the same person. We have a lot of very interesting and strange similarities.
Yep.
Oh god, there's two of you?
We both have psoriatic arthritis. We both have health administration degrees. We're working towards them.
Oh, nice.
Very weird, small things.
Yes, very, very small things.
But it's all good. Where can people find out more about Birdhouse Mysteries?
On Twitter at Birdhouse Myst, MYST.
I have listened to the prologue so far, and it's really funny. I'm enjoying it so far. I do recommend it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that a lot.
Glad I can help. And I also seen you on Savage Worlds game that you've been a part of for the last couple of weeks.
Oh, the OSR game?
Yes.
That's at GM Table, twitch.tv/GM Table. On Saturday nights, they are running a OSR bloat games system called Survive This Fantasy. It's mostly based on old, very crunchy D&D. And so because it's an old school revival, it's very easy to get hurt and very easy to die. And coming up on, well, it'll be past by the time this is released, but you can go back in their Twitch and watch it if you would like.
Yep.
Coming up on the Saturday the 15th, we're going to be facing some manner of creature with very large glowing red eyes that is probably going to kill at least one of us.
Sounds fun.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
I always find it interesting that you played non-D&D games like Savage Worlds. I have never heard of it before I met you, so I've been curious about it and want to play it in the future.
Yay! That's my hopeful claim to fame, is getting people to try out things other than D&D, especially Savage Worlds. I love that system. I've GM'd and DM'd D&D and Savage Worlds before, and I have to say I enjoy GMing Savage Worlds more just because there's a little less prep that goes into it. There's a little less crunch. There aren't hit points in Savage Worlds. You still have a thing that's equivalent to like AC, so you still have to get over a number in order to hurt somebody. But when you hurt somebody, depending on what kind of character they are, they either take 1 wound or 3 wounds before they die. And so it just makes it a lot easier. You don't have to do a lot of big math, like how many hit points does this green dragon have remaining against the barbarian and the rogue that are going to end up killing them.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Savage Worlds. I've never heard of that before. I'll definitely look into it now, though.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's the system itself is designed to be setting agnostic. So you can have one system that you can run sci-fi, fantasy, noir, Wild West, supernatural, university adventures. Like, I'm trying to think of different settings for superheroes. There are just a plethora of settings to go with Savage Worlds, the core system. And the nice thing is, as a GM and as a player, you only have to learn really one main set of rules and then some additional setting rules as appropriate.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds super cool. That's an idea for a...
Yeah, I had it on the list for potential games to try.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
Good.
Well, when you do that, hit me up because I'm always all about Savage Worlds.
Sweet. For sure.
Well, today we are here to talk about total party kills, or TPKs, and consequences in your games, and what we feel about them, and what some people on Twitter feel about them, and maybe some stories that we've had as a player or as a DM GM. So TPKs, for those that don't know, total party kills, that is when everybody in your party is dead, cannot be revived, no coming back from that, and you have to basically start over. Has anybody experienced a TPK before or created one?
I have not. I've neither played in one nor been the GM of one.
Greg, we have.
Well, I sure have.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. One of the first games that I DM'd was the Curse of Strahd, the pre-campaign quest, the Death House, I believe is what it was called.
Oh, Death House.
Yeah.
Cool.
Evidently, that is listed and known as a very difficult starting quest to send your party on before a campaign. I didn't know that. I didn't adjust the book at all. So we went through, it was like I don't even know, it was probably like a 3-4 month series type thing. Nikki, you actually lost 2 characters in that game.
I played 3 separate characters in that. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So basically, like the party got to what was supposed to be the ending room, and there's a huge monster in there that isn't immediately apparent. They found it, attempted to kill it. This is after Nikki's first character died. I believe your first character was killed by a mimic that was in the shape of a door.
Yep.
Oh, good.
Yeah, super fun.
I went off on my own. I punched a door, and the door ate me.
At level 1, probably.
Or 2. Yeah, close.
I think I think you were 2nd level by that point at least.
I made a new character.
Yep.
Who then died to the boss.
Yep. Well, no, wait. Was it you? You were the last one alive in the boss room, right?
I went
If I
unconscious
remember
in the
correctly?
boss room with my new character, and Ashley's character tried to rescue me, and she ran out dragging my ass.
That's what it was. And then the house like comes alive and unleashes all these traps and stuff, and she died on the way out trying to escape from the house.
Yep, so the house
Interesting.
decided to say, nope, not today. You're not leaving.
Yeah, it had like a bunch of like buzzsaw traps and all the doorways and all this other crap. It was ridiculous. Everybody was like, "What the hell, Greg? Like, this is your first time DMing and we wipe?" I'm like, "It's the book. I didn't do anything."
Yeah, afterwards we looked it up, and it is a very difficult starting game. Like, most people suggest either skipping it and starting at level 3 or adjusting it severely.
Yeah, thankfully they did just recently release the revamped version of the Curse of Strahd, or I guess they are going to be releasing it. I can't remember, but hopefully they had adjusted a bunch of the difficulties for that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm about to start playing Curse of Strahd tomorrow, so I didn't know any of that. I don't know if we're going to do the Death House at all.
What level are you starting at?
Well, we're doing it Savage Worlds instead of D&D. So we are starting at level 1.
Gotcha.
But we're starting at Savage Worlds level 1. So it's a little bit different. I don't know if we are going to do the Death House at all. I did know ahead of time that the Death House is something that existed, and I knew that it was very dangerous. So I don't feel like anything you just told me is like a huge spoiler.
Oh, thank God. I was like, no, really? Come on.
Yeah, I don't feel that. Plus, I'm pretty good at not metagaming anyway, but
All right.
I don't think you went into enough detail that that's going to be a problem.
I mean, that was like the overall concept, but there's hundreds of possible doors, and
yes,
it's like, which door is it? I don't know. Which door ate the person?
Yeah, and the concept that there is a boss at the end is not really,
surprising.
Yeah, shocking.
It's like, shit, there's a boss? Oh my God, I had no idea.
Spoiler alert, it's not a dragon.
So what did you guys do with your campaign? Were you going to continue the rest of Curse of Strahd, or were you intending to play something else after the Death House?
I think we made new characters and started at level 3.
Yeah, we kind of just said screw it, made all new characters, and just continued the campaign, like just skipping the Death House.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was still DMing. It was fun.
Yeah, most D&D campaigns, like 1 through 3, is like supposed to be the trial. So you don't technically need to play it. They say, like, if you want to do this, then it's great. Here you go. But if you don't and you want to start at higher level, then here's where you start.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a brand new DM. That, like I said, that was literally my first game to DM. So I didn't want to start at level 3 because I thought it might have been a bit much, just like starting fresh at 3rd level. So we went with that one instead.
I think that was the one where I got to play the Lizard Folk Plague Doctor, right?
Yes. Yeah, that was the when we actually did the regular Curse of Strahd campaign.
I don't remember her name, but she was fun.
Yeah, I don't remember her name either.
I played a Lizard Folk who was a Plague Doctor, which was a homebrew class that unfortunately was never completed, but it was a really fun class. And Ashley played a Fire Ganassi bard.
Oh.
And we were married in the game because lizard folks like warmth.
Aw, that's cute.
Was it Ashlyn? Was that her name, or was it...
Ashlyn was Ashley's character's name.
Right, that's what I was saying.
Yes. I don't remember mine, though.
Yeah, I'm trying.
It's fine. But it was amusing. And my character, the Plague Doctor, is really fun. They either can go the plague route, where that's all they want to do is cause diseases, or they can go the healing route. And I went more of like old school medicinal, where you use leeches. And,
oh, that's right. You're fucking leeches.
Yeah, I used leeches to heal people and named them alphabetically. Bob was the one that healed hangovers.
That's very funny.
Yeah, I had A through H, and then if I lost one, I had to find a new one to replace them.
So essentially, you guys had a TPK and nobody really minded. You kind of just worked through it.
I think some of us were upset. If I'm remembering who was in the party, one person in particular was upset. I was annoyed a little bit because I'm like, oh, come on, I just made this character. And it was such a fun concept. But I like it's what the dice decided, so it wasn't like super mad.
Right.
And that's one of the things about when I DM personally, like I don't like fudging rolls. I wouldn't say that it like breaks or, you know, ruins the game in any way. It just seems just like not proper, I guess.
I've actually fudged rolls to make things harder before.
Oh, jeez.
I will admit to that. And because our topic today is consequences, sometimes the players do things that more or less deserve a little bit of a hard consequence. And
Sure.
So in order to like demonstrate that, oh, you probably shouldn't do that in the future. I don't do it a lot, and I've never done it to kill a player. I've actually never killed a player. I've gotten close a couple of times. But just like if you are like, I don't know, you want to leap 15 feet to cross a building or something impossible,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be like, the DC on that's going to be a little harder. And even if you got a raise, like, I don't think you make it, you know, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But I agree with you that fudging to lessen a blow is usually not really satisfying for either the DM or the players. I find, or at least my players, they want to have consequences for their actions.
Yeah.
They want to feel like things are real and happening because of the things that they do.
I had fudged rolls before, but usually in 99.9% of the cases, it was because I was using something homebrew or I made a mistake. And the homebrew thing was not balanced properly that I didn't make. I found like on Pinterest and I realized this is fucking ridiculous. There's no way in hell that this is a CR5. Like stuff like that. Like once they hit, I'm like, Jesus, what am I actually attacking them with? This is gonna one-shot them on like a 15 to hit. No, that's not okay. Like those types of things, I'll like, no, undo, redo. Let's start over.
So how much damage do I take? So that's 8 physical damage and 94 poison damage.
Wait a second.
We're 4th level. What the hell?
There has been one time I null and voided a fight because I made a mistake and miscalculated. I based it off of 6 players, forgetting we only had 5 players because we had just lost somebody. So it was a hard encounter for 6 players. It was a deadly encounter for 5 players. It was a medium encounter for 6 players, but it was a deadly encounter for 5. And the issue was the creatures they were fighting were resistant to everything except for magic, and we had no magic players. And I didn't realize that. Like I didn't realize the connection. So I placed them basically up against stuff that they were doing half damage to constantly. And it was like just destroying them. And then I'm like, this is a medium encounter, guys. Like, why are you failing so bad? And I'm like,
you guys need to be better.
wait a second. Hold up. Okay, undo. You're all alive. The rest run away.
That entire fight was a dream sequence. You're all fine.
And how did your players feel about that? Were they glad that it was nullified, or were...
Because like literally 3 of them were unconscious and rolling death saves, and 2 of them were just kiting them and trying not to die. They were thankful that like they felt like they might have felt a little cheated, but at the same time, I'm like, shit, guys, I messed up. I'm sorry. So they were cool with that,
Right.
at least.
I think that's really important to do as a DM or a GM, to admit when you've miscalculated, like you said, or made just a mistake, even in adding something up, or you didn't take an ability that an enemy had into consideration, something like that. My players recently had an encounter with 3 vampires, and I made them the weaker version of vampires, just because if I had made them the deadly version of vampires, they would have all died. But even so, one character was downed, and rolling death saves. It's not the same as in D&D. It's much harder in Savage Worlds. You're bleeding out, so you're already you get a permanent injury, and you have to roll every turn, and you have to succeed or else you die. It's a little bit harder. But another character was close to being downed, and only one character was doing any damage to them at all, because they require a called shot to the heart, and that's at a negative penalty for calling that shot. So I was like, oh, that might have been a little too hard, but I had originally had them fighting 5 vampires, so I was glad that I knocked it down to 3, because if it was 5, I probably would have ended up with the TPK situation in that regard.
You also end up with the opposite situations. I had a situation yesterday where it was 2 players versus an adult green dragon, which is a triple deadly encounter versus 2 players, because it was a hard encounter for 5, and that's what it was supposed to be. They utterly destroyed my dragon. 2 of them destroyed my dragon, and then completely wiped a crime lord family out of all of their money within a minute. I'm just like, the fuck?
Yeah, that seems like a lot.
Oh my god, it was a ridiculous minute. It was it took 3 hours to get through that minute, but it was a ridiculous minute.
That's really funny.
But there are going to be consequences for their actions, because they just stole all of the money from one of the head crime lords in the entire town. They stole the staff off of the unconscious body that they cast eye bite on to make fall asleep of the head of the house. They killed her dragon, they killed her knight, and they stole 3 items that one of them stole for her to begin with. And I'm like, there are going to be consequences for this.
Yeah.
And one of them's like, oh, we could use their staff, right? And I'm like, make me an intelligence check, please. And they did. I'm like, you're pretty sure that's a really fucking bad idea to use the staff of the head of the household and just walk around using it. Seems like a bad idea.
One would hope.
Yeah, that would get noticed for sure.
Yeah, sell it.
Oh, we'll just
sure.
sell it. I'm like, this also seems like a bad idea.
It's really weird. The head of that household over there actually has a staff exactly like this. Deception check.
Oh, well. Here's 50,000. No, if I give them a deception check, they'll succeed. They have a bard who's ridiculous.
Oh, fair enough. Never mind. Well, then give them a deception check, but make the DC too high for them to possibly make it.
It's a 30. There's no 32. Damn it. DC
I meant
40.
35.
Natural 20. Damn it.
There's just no winning with that party, it seems.
Nope.
And that's actually if you listen to the beginning 10 or so episodes of the podcast that I run, the party just ran roughshod over all of my encounters, including the first arc boss, more or less. And they ran over her because they had good planning, and they stunned her before they could get into a direct encounter with her, so she wasn't able to use all of her powers at her disposal. But until that point, I had been starting to feel like, wow, am I just bad as a GM because I can't give them any challenge? Mm-hmm. So you have to walk that line where it can't be too underpowered, because then the players won't feel like they're accomplishing anything grand. But if you make it too overpowered, then you might end up killing them unnecessarily.
You got to find that happy middle ground.
Yeah. So, Nikki, you might need to pump up your... Well, you would think that adult green dragon would be enough, but you might need to pump up your encounters a little bit, smack them down so that they go back into that, things can hurt us mode.
Yeah, honestly, I think the way to do it for this isn't going to be my normal method of just throw more monsters at them. I think it needs to be a more political intrigue And like they're like, we have enough money to start our own crime lord. They'd be our own crime lords and like buy out that place that we just stole all this money from. And I'm like, oh, that's gonna be hard. It's like, I don't know how to do a political campaign.
It's a much better idea than I was just going to say throw 2 green dragons at them.
I will say that it was really close. If I wouldn't have rolled so bad, they probably would have gone down. But they were smart. They split up, so I couldn't hit both of them with the poison breath. Then I missed like 3 times with my freaking legendary actions. So, and the constitution saves that they kept succeeding and they hit on every single hit. So like it was a lot of luck based too. If they would have failed a little bit more or I would have succeeded a little bit more, it could have gone a completely different path. But even still, it was just like, are you shitting me?
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that it's interesting to me to throw in roleplay consequences versus just the consequences of monsters, because with role-playing consequences, you end up with situational things. You end up having to think more about how they're going to act and how they're going to respond to situations. So you can put them up against people where they need to be polite and they need to be respectful, or something could happen.
Right.
Rulers, kings, diplomats, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, this just happened last week in our game. I thought it was going to be a really chill recording session for our podcast, and I thought this was going to be a downtime episode. And so I went through each player asking what their character did for a week, because they had about a week and a half until an event that they had been building up to was going to happen. So I was like, okay, let's see what happens. And, one wanted to go hang out in the forest, and one wanted to research something, and the other 2 were staking out the location where the event was going to happen. And the 4th one, the last one, decided that he was going to try to sneak into the place by himself. And this was in the middle of the night, while 2 of the party members were across town, like half an hour walking, and didn't have a way to get there any faster. And one of the characters was across the street, so it would be at least a couple turns before he could get to his location. So he was doing everything right. He was being sneaky, and then he went in through a window and left the window open. And I specifically asked him, "Are you going to close that window?" And he said no. So when he made a little bit of noise and drew the enemy out of her office, I had her roll to notice if she would remember that window was previously closed, and she did. So I had her roll notice. The player was invisible. I had her roll notice to see if she was a saurian, like a lizard folk or a dragonborn in D&D. And I had her roll notice to see if she would discover him by scent or something. And she, in Savage Worlds, when you roll the highest number on a die, you get to re-roll it. So she rolled a 6 on a 6 and was able to get high enough that she could notice him even though he was invisible.
Very nice.
So this led to a combat 1-on-1, and she had magic and he did not have magic. He ended up on the ground outside the window as she was shooting magic down at him, and he went down twice during that encounter, had a broken leg and a broken arm, and was able to eventually limp away. But the consequence of that action was that the other player, who was just across the street, had come and entered this encounter, and he got captured. So now suddenly the next thing I have to plan is not necessarily a combat encounter. It could be a social encounter, like Nikki was saying, where they have to deal with these cultists and get their party member back. But if it goes badly, it could end up being another combat encounter, and they're already in kind of a bad way. So
That's great.
It is and it isn't. Like, it's a tough situation. Everybody was a little bit like on edge after the session because this happened.
Yeah, I mean, hostage transfers are usually pretty possibly harmful.
Yeah.
Stressful, that's the word I was thinking of.
I personally, I love stuff like that. Like, part of me, honestly, obviously hates it when it's my character or, a friend's character. And I'm like, no, God damn it, why? But, I love that aspect of role-playing games, because things like that make you have to think. And when games, to me at least, when you can just do whatever you want without consequence, then it's like, why? What's the point?
Right.
A perfect example is in my Friday game, we've been going around murdering these people that they're bad people. I'll straight up say they're bad people, and they've attacked my character's family, so I've attacked them back, and my character has a vendetta against them, and she's like, I'm going to murder all of you. But because of that, the consequence is she has a bounty on her head right now. So more and more people are targeting her specifically. As they go through, they're like, you're worth a lot of fucking money. I'm going to make sure I get it. And we're not talking like 500 gold. We're talking like 12,000 gold, which to anybody is retirement money in D&D.
Jeez,
Right.
that's like Vash the Stampede levels.
Yes. They're real pissed. She's murdered like
Apparently
8 or 9 of them so far.
What was it in Trigon? It was like a billion double dollars or some crap for Vash. Sorry, I guess that's for a different podcast.
I don't understand this reference.
But yeah, no, it's always super interesting to have. Obviously, I mean, consequences are a thing in the actual world, so it makes sense that it would translate into D&D and tabletop role-playing games as a whole. Especially because, you know, like you just said, if you have no consequences in the world that your players are playing in, like, there's no point, because they can literally just walk around, do whatever they want without worrying about it. The same Curse of Strahd game, obviously not the Death House one, because that was a TPK, but in the actual, like, the regular campaign, one of my players decided to attempt to, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain this properly. There were wolf hunters in the town that they went to that actually assisted them assisted the players getting into the town and a decent price at the inn. One of my players decided to go up to their room and knock on the door. The wolf hunters opened it. She ran in and started like touching all of their stuff in their room after being asked not to do so. Needless to say, the wolf hunters were not super happy with this happening. So they threw a dagger at her, and I believe hit her, which caused her to react and do some kind of a spell or something. I can't remember exactly that.
Cast darkness.
That's what it was. It was darkness. And the guard showed up and was like, hey, what's going on? And wouldn't listen to the player at all, because they are newcomers in the town, whereas the wolf hunters have lived there for an extended period of time, so they have kind of a like more leniency, I suppose, which led to that player's character being arrested and then put in the stockades for, I think it was almost the entire next session, until I created another character to get her out, because the guards were there and there was no way she was escaping normally. And then that ended with the rest of the party basically having to put her in a bag of holding and then constantly remember that she's in there, and then take her head out for like a couple seconds so she could breathe, and then stuff her head back in for almost the remainder of the campaign. Or at least while they were in that town.
Yep.
Yeah,
That was
super fun.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, and then she got framed for killing the leader of the town's wife, which was also super fun.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, you're giving me ideas for what I can do with my players.
Let them know that I apologize ahead of time.
Well, it's just, you can't, and they have been warned about this previously, that it would be a bad idea to just go to where you know the cultists are and kill all of them, because even if they are cultists, that's not the way that justice is supposed to be rendered in like civilized places. So they've been warned not to do that. And if they do that with like trying to recover this hostage player, I think that the repercussions have to be, you know, them being arrested, probably, because you can't just go around killing people.
Right. Regardless of the way that the whole thing played out.
Yeah, I like that concept too, because like especially if you have a party that's murder hobo-y, which I will fully admit that I tend to be a murder hobo with certain characters.
Same here.
I punch first and ask questions later, or shoot first and ask questions later, or don't ask questions at all and just assume they're for the worst, that they're the bad guys. But it's interesting when those actions eventually do have consequences where people don't trust you because they've heard rumors about you, or you kill the wrong person and now an entire town hates you and you can never go back to that town.
Right.
It's like playing Skyrim, and the very first town you walk into, you kick the dog that runs up to you. The whole town attacks the crap out of you until you reload the game.
Yeah, that's true.
And what's funny is, like, I did ask on Twitter what people were thinking of consequences in the game in TPKs, and a lot of people, I was surprised actually, a lot of people think that TPKs and consequences don't necessarily belong in the game, and it takes away from the fun aspect, and that it's the DM's responsibility to balance it so that there isn't the risk of a TPK. Now, some did specify that consequences for actions are different than like a consequence of a TPK, but there's a lot of people who are like, oh, pull your punches if they're gonna be killed. And I'm like, no, I'm good.
Well, I think there is something to be said for letting like one or two characters go, because then you don't have to completely like start from a new spot in your campaign. You have those two people who have been through everything that has happened before, and they need to recruit two new characters, but the same players who understand maybe that the actions that they took led to harsh consequences. So that I can understand leaving somebody alive rather than killing everybody, but sometimes, depending on the situation players get themselves in, it might not be feasible to do that.
Right.
Yeah, I can agree to that.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're putting them up against some kind of a creature or an individual who is far more powerful than they are, and they still, feel the need to try to assert themselves into a situation or what have you, maybe knock out or possibly kill, like you said, one or two players, and then have the person be like, or have the players roll a persuasion check or something to allow them to maybe talk their way out of basically dying. Or just have the person be like, oh, well, your two friends are going to be examples of what happens when you mess with me and my peoples,
Right.
I did like with the dragon idea. Obviously, they destroyed it, so it didn't really help. But my original idea was this is going to kill them. Like that was what was going to happen, and I didn't really want that because that wasn't my intention. It wasn't like you did something stupid. It was the player who dispelled the transportation device had good intents and didn't realize, hey, now we can't get to them. So my original concept to get them out of this, even though I didn't tell them, I told them make a new character just in case, was to have them get teleported out in the last minute, but have to deal with the consequences of being caught breaking in to this crime lord's home.
Sorry,
So that was my original plan.
At the beginning of that statement, we're going to have to cut in a spoiler warning for your players.
Well, I mean, it didn't happen.
No, I know. That doesn't mean they get to know.
Yeah, it's fine. So I had the intention to save them, but one of them could have still died depending on how good he was going to be at talking, because he would have been caught betraying the person he was working for. But I would have kept one of them alive at least in that process. Maybe two. It ended up being at a moot point because they just destroyed everything. But
live and learn.
It was a thought that counts, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned backup characters. I kind of always have my players make backup characters. Do you guys do the same?
I don't.
Sorry to be interviewing you guys instead of the other
No,
way
you're
around.
fine.
No, that's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Go ahead, Nikki.
I haven't. I only have them make backup characters if it's like a legitimate reason for them to die. We've only had, other than players leaving the game IDM, players leaving for their own reasons. The only time we've had a player die was because the player wanted a new character. They didn't enjoy playing their character currently, and looking at their character, it was not built well. It needed, they were a strength-based fighter and they didn't have a very good strength, stuff like that. And flavor-wise, it was fun and she enjoyed role-playing him, but she always missed and she hated it. So I'm like, you have a choice. You can make a new character or you can play out Vareth until he's dead. It's up to you. You can choose. And I gave him the opportunity to leave, but he pissed off the wrong person in the fight and ended up being killed. Which, I mean, she was switching characters anyway, but it was still sad. Now he's a zombie for the Grave Clerk.
Nice.
Oh no.
Yep. The Paladin of Helm is now a zombie.
Very nice.
Oh,
Very
no.
nice. I'm in the same boat as Nikki. I usually only have my players create backup characters or just have like an extra character ready when there's a very good chance that in the next session or by the end of the current session, their character will perish at some point. How about you? Same?
Gotcha.
Or
No, I from their first big fight where they had people almost like where they had people take 2 and 3 wounds, they kind of their own accord were like, maybe we should consider backup characters. And I was like, yeah, that would probably be a good idea. And I encouraged them to, run those characters by me just as safety, just in case they needed to use them. And then before that vampire encounter that I talked about earlier, that occurred on a different plane of existence than the material plane. So I told them before that encounter happened, hey, if you guys die in this, you're probably going to need to make a character from this plane in addition to the one you already have from the material plane, just because it would be a lot easier to justify why a new person joined on that side of things.
Yeah.
And they all loved it because you get to, in our game, it's the plane of magic, and you can be literally anything you want. So one person picked like a frog person wizard, and another is going to be a hobgoblin, and blah, blah, blah. So they got excited about it. But I was like, yeah, you might want to do this just in case this happens. And I try to encourage them to have those characters so that they can be already invested in something if the situation comes up. Some people have asked if that makes them less invested in their current characters, and I found that that's not the case at all.
I do think for our actual play games, that might be something we should discuss, just because since we have to put out an episode every couple of weeks or whatever, and like there's a schedule about it, and there's a certain world that it needs to fit in and it needs to make sense, it might require more planning than, hey, I'm going to put together a new character, here's my character, okay, bye.
Right. Yeah, so I definitely recommend doing it. That way you can have eyes on it before it needs to go into action.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, interestingly enough, the point that you brought up about your players not feeling like connected to their current character at that point, that's actually something I was going to say was, in my eyes, if you just create another character like ahead of time, that kind of gives your players the thing like, oh, I don't really like my current character anymore, I'm just going to kill him off and then jump to the second one. But I mean, if you've found that doesn't happen, that's great. Absolutely.
Yeah, I found that, or at least with my players, they are not into that sort of thing.
I think that could happen with certain people.
I was about
to,
I think okay.
Keith might be like that. Keith is my husband, Elle. I think he would do something like that because he has a tendency sometimes where he just makes accidentally really crappy characters. And then like the next character is just a little bit better. So then he wants to play this new character, and then he realizes like, oh, it's not that much better, and then he wants to play a new character. And he switched his character technically twice, but technically 3 times for one game that we played in, because he played 2 different characters, but one of them switched personas and was a complete revamp and came back.
Gotcha.
So he was like a lawful good paladin guard, and that didn't really clash well with our party. And he eventually was like, I'm done with this, I don't want to be part of this, and he left. He brought a new character in. That character drank himself to death.
Oh my.
Yep.
Because he didn't want to play him anymore. So now he's a ghost haunting our tavern. And then he brought back his old character, but changed him to be a fallen paladin.
Well, that's interesting.
Who went the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
That's very interesting. Because then you have to, over time, explore what happened in the in-between.
Yep.
He was pretty open about it. He got addicted to drugs.
Oh my.
That my character was part of the reason he got them, but my character was pretty like chill about drugs, and like it didn't affect her negatively. So, but he got like hardcore addicted to something that I made up called Hush, which helps you, it gives you the potential to forget the last 24 hours, but it helps you sleep. So he started taking that, and his character became addicted to it. But he also was just mad at all the guards for being idiots and was like, I refuse to be a guard anymore.
I mean, to be fair, most of our characters were pretty mad at the guards for being idiots.
That is fair. And the detectives. Those guys were stupid.
Yeah, Barnabas and whatever the hell the other guy's name was.
Barnabas and Bailey. That's not their names, but that's what I'm going to
Sure. Let's go with that. That was what, a circus thing?
This was, yeah.
Okay.
This was a Dragon Heist that we were playing for 5th edition.
Oh,
We beat Dragon Heist completely, but there were some consequences in that game too, actually, now that I think about it. We had situations where certain people didn't like us because of how we treated them. Certain characters just didn't want to talk to us at all or work with us, period. Some people we didn't build enough friendship with, but mostly it was positive things because we were friendly to a lot of people. So when we did end up having to fight the big bad end boss type thing, we had dozens of people come to our aid in that battle. So that was pretty awesome.
that's nice. And that's an example of good consequences.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people,
The good consequences are
yeah, a lot of people just think, oh, consequences for actions have to be negative. And no, sometimes you gain allies, and sometimes you find clues to things that you needed, and so those successes are just as much consequences. It's just they don't have that negative connotation.
Yeah, that's completely fair. There was a couple of things like that where if we did enough positive things, we got certain things out of it. And that wasn't our intent when we did it. We weren't like, oh, hey, we're going to rescue you because you're the blacksmith and that means we can get a discount and all that stuff. But it just so happened that during role play, we had that happen. And in my other game, we've had that happen too, where our characters saved people and there were positive consequences because of that. So like we saved, or helped people, I should say, not saved, but like there was a little old lady who sold sweet cakes, and we literally would buy sweet cakes from her every single day. And there was a couple of days where we just gave her 20 gold to buy all her sweet cakes, even though that was like 10 times the asking price. And she ended up having enough money to buy a house and to go on her own and everything. That caused a consequence for her because she had too much money. She got a target on her back and she ended up losing her grandson.
Oh no.
But that led to us destroying the person who was kidnapping all these kids. And now she's like the grandma to the adopted kids that we have.
Aw.
So it's like the good consequence was she's like part of our in-character family now, but the bad consequence was she lost her actual grandson, but it wasn't really our fault technically. It was just like part of the story. But
Is there an actual term for positive consequence? Because con itself is a negative prefix. Wouldn't it be pro? Never mind. I don't think that's actually a word. Never mind. It just sounds weird to say
negative consequences, right?
Oh, really?
Reinforcement. Often referred as reinforcement is positive consequence.
Okay. It's just that positive consequence sounds kind of like an oxymoronic statement, so it was confusing me.
I mean, that makes sense. Looking up online, it says positive and negative consequences. And there's also positive reinforcement and positive consequences, which it looks like that means the same thing. But I think it's just because we are so used to consequences being a negative thing.
Right. There you go. Little English lesson in the middle of the podcast.
Fun facts of the day. I'm trying to think.
Don't hurt yourself.
Shut up. There have been situations where characters have done something. Okay, so Shadowrun. I have an interesting story for a Shadowrun game. There was a player who, so in Shadowrun you have these things called runs that you meet a Johnson. A fixer hooks you up with a Johnson, and the Johnson is the person hiring you. It's a Minster Johnson, no matter what gender or who they are. And usually you don't necessarily have to meet the Johnson, but if you do, it's purely to get your information about the job, and then you leave. The biggest thing that you're taught, though, is don't screw over the Johnson and don't be rude to the Johnson. Like, those are the biggest things. Also, don't fuck with dragons. Like, that's the second biggest thing. So one time we go on this run, and we go to a cafe, and there's a briefcase on the table, and on the briefcase is a note saying, call your fixer, I think is what it said. And we called him. He's like, oh, touch the briefcase and you'll be teleported to where you need to go. So we touch the briefcase and we go into this place. And one of our players noticed something peculiar about our Johnson. They noticed that the eyes, Greg, Are you okay?
No, I'm
over there?
perfectly fine. Go ahead. I might be giggling incessantly like a child, but continue.
They noticed that the eyes of this person were draconic, but the person was very obviously a human currently. So with this knowledge, you would normally take from this, hey, they're probably hiding the fact on purpose that they're dragon or draconic in nature. He instead goes, I really like your eyes. Are you draconic or something? And the person was not happy about that. And they tried to brush it off and basically like, you can leave now. But he was persistent and kept pushing. So they say, everybody else can go, you stay. So we all left and he never came back out. And we're like, okay, we're going to go because we're terrified of this person. They're obviously very powerful. So we leave and we come home. And when we get back to our base, we get a box. And inside is a statue that looks identical to our good friend. And nobody rolled high enough to realize that it wasn't just a statue.
Oh my.
Jesus.
And the best part was my husband's character, who was basically Freddie Mercury and was hilarious, used stone shape on the stone statue to make it into a coffee table, ultimately killing the player.
Oh no.
And nobody knew.
Oh, that's awful.
Because we're all like, we all rolled and none of us rolled high enough to know that it wasn't a statue. So yeah, that consequence was keep your damn mouth shut.
Mhm.
Or you get turned into a stone coffee
Or
table.
at the very least, don't press matters.
Right, exactly. Like, why would you do that? Like, if somebody's obviously in disguise, don't push it, especially if they're much more powerful than you.
Yeah, seems about right.
It's kind of like if Strahd showed up randomly at the beginning. Like, Strahd shows up a lot throughout, and I'm trying not to give spoilers.
Thank you.
He shows up a lot, but if you're level 3 and just starting and you happen to run into Strahd, you're not going to be like, I'm going to fight you right now. Come at me. Like,
Well, you can. It just won't end well.
Yeah.
Right.
His name's on the book. I mean, come on.
That would be funny, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure somebody's done it out there somewhere. Somebody probably even maybe beat Strahd at 3rd level or whatever by random happenstance.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. If you just had like a party full of clerics and paladins who were very lawful good and refused to accept the fact that they had to get stronger, and then they just kept dying, and they're like, this is Junior. This is the 3rd.
Just slowly whittling
Repeat
away at
over and
Strahd's health.
over. Repeat over and over and over again until eventually everybody is dead. Anybody else have any fun stories of consequences?
We're going to see what the consequences of the player's actions are next time we play, and that will further determine what happens to them. I feel like they're probably going to be in a kill first, ask questions later kind of mood, which probably won't end well for them.
That's fair.
But that remains to be seen.
There was an interesting comment by Sword Coast Soundscapes on the Twitter who said, just quote, welcome to purgatory. So if you have a TPK, what's to stop you from just being like, you're in purgatory now? And changing
That's
the
a
story
really
up
interesting
a little
concept. One that I have not personally delved into too heavily. If anybody's ever watched or seen Dice Camera Action, they did a Curse of Strahd run through where toward the beginning one of the characters did actually die and then ended up just kind of being a spirit for, I think it was like a session or two, and then ended up in like possessing some other body to get his own back. It was really insane, but that kind of falls in the same vein as Purgatory, I would imagine.
Yeah, like trying to get your body back.
Mm-hmm.
I've done in a play-by-post game, we've done something like that where a party member died. And actually, I have a good thing for death and consequences. This party member died because he got mad and stormed off. And he ran into a fight that was meant for all of them. And instead of saying, oh shit, closing the door and walking the fuck away, he said, finally, something to hit, ran inside and hit it, and then tried to walk away. And then I crit against him.
Oh no.
And he went down. And unfortunately, then he rolled a nat 1 on his death saves and he ended up just dying.
Oh, come on.
So it was a little bit of, yeah, it was ridiculous. And I'm like, he's like, is there any way? I'm like, no, dude, I'm sorry. Like, I'll let you stay as a ghost because technically the way the world was supposed to work is you're supposed to, when you die, you're supposed to make a new character. Like, that's how the server worked. Or you can go on a resurrection quest. Your friends can go on a resurrection quest to get you back to your body. So we decided to do that route, and I let him stay on as a ghost and mostly roleplay his friendship and relationship with the characters, and we finished up that quest, and then we went on a mission for them to get somebody to resurrect him, because they were like level 3. And the resurrection quest was difficult but fun, and they had to go to the Feywilds and find like a diamond to bring back to this cleric who was willing to resurrect him. But I liked this fact that there was a consequence for him being resurrected. It wasn't super bad, but there was something that happened because you died. You were dead for quite some time, and Revivify isn't going to work anymore. If it was just Revivify, fine. But this was like, you have to be resurrected with a resurrection spell or a raise the dead spell. And the consequences for him, we equally discussed, and we both made sure we were okay with it, was basically a type of PTSD and panic attacks. So when he was alone, he had to make a wisdom save to see if he would start to panic. And if he failed with like a natural 1, then he went into a full-blown panic attack and could do nothing. Otherwise, he was just kind of shaky and might have disadvantage, but he could eventually calm down. And if he saw people, then he was fine. But I liked that idea. And then the other people had consequences of the way they were killed, like they lost an arm. My character was killed by Cone of Cold. So her consequence was she has cold vulnerability now.
Nice. Makes sense.
And has a constant state of like pneumonia, even though she's not sick.
That sounds awful. Like
Yes.
legit. That sounds absolutely awful.
Like it didn't change anything on her character. It was just for flavor, but the cold vulnerability did.
Yeah, I mean, makes a lot of sense that way. I mean, speaking of imposing some kind of consequence just like on your character or whatever. I mean, one of my favorite characters I've ever played, and I've brought this up a couple times in previous episodes, was a cleric named Glory, who was a what do you call it? Like a hermit, and lived out in the wilderness by himself for many, many, many years. So he didn't any social abilities whatsoever. And I made it so that every time he wanted to do something in combat, before I decided what I wanted to do, I would have to roll a d20, and then I think it was on like a 9 or lower, my character would do something not super helpful for the party. Like he would go crazy and start just like running in the opposite direction, or he would jump into a hole and hide for the turn, or something like that. You know, I always like doing stuff like that when it comes to character creation, or just in general, where you just kind of take a flaw and then kind of level it up a couple times. I just find it interesting.
That's actually a core concept in Savage Worlds. They in character creation,
kidding. Awesome.
the second thing you do after putting in your attributes is you pick hindrances for your character, and most of them have a mechanical aspect. Like the one that comes to mind immediately is if you're an outsider, anyone outside your like family or town or clan or even species, you get a -2 to persuasion when talking to them.
Nice.
And they have a lot of different hindrances that have those sorts of consequences. Like you could be slow, you could have one eye, you could be blind, stuff like that.
That sounds super cool. I definitely got to try that game out at some point.
Yeah. But talking about the purgatory thing, you guys reminded me that the character who nearly died 2 times the last play session has a ring on that they got from an enemy, where if you die while you're holding it or wearing it, your soul goes into the ring and you can still communicate with whoever is wearing the ring. So that would be an interesting thing if he happened to die while wearing it.
Yeah, that's a super cool, like, it's almost like a cursed magic item in a way.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I just gave the party a cursed magic item, and the person who's wearing it constantly hears the guy inside of it. It's has a conscience, and he's just like, "My name's Jack. I want more blood. Give me more blood. Kill that person." Like he's just constantly trying to get him to kill more people.
Oh my.
And he's just like, "Hi, Jack. What's your last name?" He's like, "Just Jack. That's all you need to know." And I told him how I'm like, just so you know, because I'll probably forget, you can only remove this one way. You're not going to find it.
Wait, remove the curse or remove the armor?
Remove the ring. You can only remove it with a wish spell.
Oh, jeez.
You cannot remove it with remove curse. So it was just funny. And it doesn't technically have any negatives to it. It has a drain ability, which technically helps the person wearing it, and it has a ability where a person can do more damage, but it's just constantly talking and trying to make the person it's talking to a murderer. So we kind of joked about, or we were kind of talking about how it might lead towards some sanity checks later, because if you have somebody constantly whispering at you to murder, then you might eventually start to listen.
Yeah, seems pretty fair. I feel the need to point out that I forgot that this was an audio only format, and I spent the last 20 seconds after the whole conversation with the ring thing. I was like, that makes a lot of sense, and then tried to like pull my wedding ring off, completely not realizing that this was audio only for a second there. Like, oh, I'm just doing this to myself now. Great.
Good job.
You're committing to the bit.
Okay, I appreciate the out.
Oh my goodness.
I know. I get that a lot.
Anyway, so last minute advice as a DM or player about TPKs and consequences and how to deal with them.
Okay. I would say, I feel like more often than not, TPKs are, maybe this is just me wearing my GM hat and feeling like TPKs are more a consequence of player actions than they are necessarily of GM actions.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm being unfair in that, but I feel like if you get in a position where you are potentially going to kill all of your players, the players probably did something to put themselves there. And if they didn't, then you have to re-evaluate how you GM and how you throw conflict at your characters. Because if it is on you, then you need to work on balancing and playtesting encounters before they go live. Like, there are a lot of tools online. If I can remember what they are, I will tell Nikki what they are, and she can include it in the description. But there are a lot of tools online for both D&D and Savage Worlds that let you fake run an encounter and see whether or not, just by dice rolls, your players will survive it. And
Nice.
you can use those to check the probability and see if it's a fair encounter or not. And for me, I feel like it should be about 60-40, like 60% success, 40% failure. Because then maybe that's a little too harsh, but then it feels like a real difficult action to get through an encounter successfully, rather than just something that players can steamroll.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think my advice would be, don't be afraid to admit if you messed up as a GM specifically. And while I think giving a little bit of leeway, especially if it's a newer player, make sure to stand your ground if you do end up giving a consequence. If it was a new player, then obviously you'd be like, hey, if you do that, you're probably going to die. Or if you do that, this is going to happen. Let them learn. But if it's a player who should know better, who knows what's going to happen if they shoot a fireball in the random middle of a town or something like that, like, make sure that you stick to the consequences and let the players find a way to get them out of it versus you just letting them out of it.
Absolutely, because I mean, as we've said a couple times in this podcast, it's a collaboration between the DM and the players. The DM creates a situation, the players act out said situation in whatever way they see fit. Sometimes that may lead to negative happenings. Sometimes it leads to positive happenings. I mean, I'm relatively new to DMing. I think, like I said, the first game I DM'd was that Curse of Strahd game, and I think that was 2 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. But in my experience, I mean, players do what players do, and then, it is the DM's job to kind of adjust stuff as necessary based on the players they have, I suppose. But at the same time, if your players are going to continue doing stuff that you've either warned them against or have kind of mentioned, like for instance, the at the beginning of I want to say it was Princes of the Apocalypse, when it was myself, you, Mike, and Tasha, I believe, and Keith were playing. At the beginning, where it was like we were choosing which direction to go, and one of them had like an acid breathing dragon on one side. Like, obviously, had we continued and chosen to go down that road, we would have clearly been in contact with a beast that was far too powerful for us to handle. And at that point, I mean, my wife was the DM, and she's really nice, I guess I'll say, as far as DMs are concerned. And she was like, you don't want to do this, but I mean, I'm not going to stop you. And then obviously we didn't do it. But had she just been like, okay, here's the dragon that I warned you about, I would not have been upset with her if we ended up wiping the party at that point, because we literally walked into it with no regrets. But yeah.
I would say always make sure that you're being open with your players, and at session 0 you make them aware of what they're getting into. If this is going to be a hardcore survival game, make sure they know that. If it's going to be a lackadaisy game, make sure they know that.
Right. And I think the key thing in Greg's point that his story he just mentioned was that the DM warned the players about what could happen if they did something. And so that's definitely the key. You have to craft a world and a story and a plot situation that allows your characters to make educated decisions. Whether or not they choose to make smart decisions is something completely different. But as long as they can make an educated decision, you've done your job.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So, Elle, last question. Which podcast, if any, inspire you during your creation of your own games?
Which podcasts inspire me?
Or games?
I get I think the main inspiration for the current game I'm running, I kind of thought about this afternoon actually, would be Oblivion, the Elder Scrolls game. I didn't realize it until today, but as I was playing a different game, I was like, oh, I kind of drew from Oblivion for a lot of, at least half of the plot aspects of my current campaign. But it's really about letting characters create themselves and act as they want to, and building that like open world, and then also throwing rifts that have like dangerous monsters and stuff there that you have to close.
It's always a good story point right there.
That's true.
Yeah. Oh, I did remember what those encounter calculator and like probability calculators were. There is a 5e tool that I've used a lot, dungeon.bin.sh. I gave Nikki the link so that she can put that up. And then for Savage Worlds, Zadmar is a really big creator of free and also paid stuff for Savage Worlds, and his website is godwars2.org, and so I have that link there for her as well. And they are just a good idea to check ahead of time what you're throwing at your players before you do it.
Awesome. I will definitely have those down there. So everybody, please go check out Elle and the Birdhouse Mysteries. Give her a like on Twitter and tell her we sent you.
Oh, thanks.
And thank you so much for joining. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys.
You can find us on Beholder to No One on Twitter or Beholder to No One on Facebook, and you can find our podcast wherever podcasts are found. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.